Students, what was your most memorable moment from the school bus? Story 1. I have two stories. In middle school, my bus once caught on fire a block away from the school. It was only a tiny one, but enough to call the firefighters. We all piled off and watched them do their thing, and they brought a second bus, which also caught on fire. Eventually, we were brought to a third bus 30 minutes later. This was all during the winter, and we weren't allowed to walk back to the school because of safety reasons. Never understood why it was more safe to have kids standing outside in the winter next to a bus on fire than to walk them a block back to the school. The other time, I was in first grade. My bus driver was a crazy nice guy, and he knew us all. One day, my aunt, who always picked me up, wasn't there at the stop, and he said that I could stay on the bus and he would drive back after the route. Maybe she was just late. So we drove back and she still wasn't there. So he asked me which house was mine. He drove us there and parked the bus. We rang the bell a bunch of times and threw rocks at her window. Nothing. Her car was there, though it all was very weird. So my mom's friend drove by and saw us, and she offered to take me to her house so I could call my parents and stay there for a while, even though it was her birthday. The bus driver left and said, "Don't worry, she'll probably just be asleep." Turns out she was eternally asleep and had a brain aneurysm earlier in the day. I'll never forget that day. Or the nice driver, though, who wanted to make sure that I was safe before he left. He even made sure to look out for me for the rest of the year. Great guy. Story 2. When I was in 6th grade, I moved from a really small town where I could walk to school every day to a much larger one where I had to ride the bus. I was having trouble finding my way around the school the first week and ended up running very, very late to catch the bus at the end of the day. I was already beating myself up about the fact that I was going to have to call one of my parents, who would then have to leave work early to pick me up. But when I got outside, the bus was pulled right up to the doors waiting for me. The bus driver knew I had been on the bus that morning and verified with my brother that I was supposed to get on the bus to go home. So he waited. I know it seems really insignificant, but all of the stress and anxiety I was feeling trying to settle into a new house, a new city, and a new school, it made a lasting impression on me. So thanks, Ron. I remember having some really nice and kind bus drivers when I was a kid. And it can really make all the difference between dreading your trip to school or really enjoying it. I never minded taking the bus, and when I was in high school, really enjoyed talking to the drivers when I would travel for track and field meets. And it's a good reminder for bus drivers that things might not be great at home, and the peace and quiet of the bus ride may be very significant to a kid. You never know what impression you might have. Story 3. One time, this kid, Dana, who looked identical to Donkey Lips from Salute Your Shorts, just look it up, was dared to drink an entire room-temperature 2-liter bottle of Coke before we got to this stop. Now, this kid chugged the entire bottle down like an absolute champion. At almost the instant his face would form a smug grin of satisfaction from a job well done, he proceeded to barf a borderline fountain of foamy sticky soda all over 24 terrified kids on the bus. It's as if his entire stomach was filled with rolls of Mentos, which was possibly considering the candy was at its commercial peak at the time. I mean, the force of this thing could have put out a house fire. His arch reached over like 4 rows of seats and sprayed wildly back and forth like a diabetic sprinkler system as he struggled to rein control from his carbonated demonic nightmare. The bus driver had to stop the bus to attend to the frightened children and made a short but sincere effort to pat dry those poor souls caught at ground zero with government-graded paper towels. I've never seen anything quite like it, and I'm afraid I may never see something like it again. Well done, Dana. Well done. Story 4. I drove a school bus for students who were in the juvenile court system. They had been expelled from every standard school in the district and attended classes at juvie. They had been through 6 bus drivers in the past 4 weeks of school when I received this school as my first assignment. Started 2 weeks prior. Now, I am a retired Greyhound driver, so their crap wasn't anything that I hadn't seen before. They thought that they had run off the other bus drivers, so they thought that I would be the next one if they screwed with me. There were only 12 students, but because of their school, it took about 3 hours to drop them all off over town. The general rule is, when you pick up students in the morning, you start at the student farthest from the school and work your way there. In the afternoon, you drop off the closest first. The 2 students that should have been dropped off first were the biggest smarty pants. They would throw crap, scream and swear, and then laugh that they were getting off, and too bad for me. So I told them to clean up their torn up paper, and they laughed and swore at me. I followed the procedure and wrote them up to their principal, which of course this meant nothing because they were already expelled, so what else can they do? So the next day I loaded the students and they started their crap, and I drove the morning route home, i.e. for this kid first. Man, they started screaming, "I'm gonna call my mommy. I'm gonna get you fired." I laughed and I told them that their mama would appreciate that I kept them all supervised for an extra 2 hours. Every time one of them acted up, they were the last to get off. They complained about turning the radio on, and they got Dr. Laura or Sean Hannity. They stopped their crap in a week. Story 5. Some kid in the back of the bus was being harassed by this bully. Now, my school district didn't really do anything about bullies, and this kid being bullied was sitting 3 to a seat with his legs in the aisle, and the bully was sitting by one of his friends in the aisle across from the kid he was messing with. The bully decided to start pushing the kid's leg. Before, it was verbal, but now it was physical. The kid told the bully to stop, and the bully mocked him and did it again. Then the kid punched the bully in the nose, breaking it and causing this huge amount of blood to leak from it. By now, the bus was stopped at some bus stop. The kid gets his stuff and gets off at the bus stop, but there's a few ahead of his. The second he's off, he starts running and going a different route to his house. The bus driver was unaware of what happened until somebody yelled for the bus driver to call someone because the bully's nose wouldn't stop bleeding. So she calls someone while the bully is calling his mom crying. So we get the police to show up, his mom, other kids have called their parents because at this point, we've been all at a standstill for 30 plus minutes. And then the principal. We don't know who called the police. So they, along with the principal, are asking who did it and to confess. And we're all like, we don't know, of course, because we did know, but why would we tell on our hero? The principal and the police are talking and they think that the kid is still on the bus. And we then say, oh, he got off, we don't know where he went or who he was. The principal and the police look at the bus driver who shrugs because she didn't realize what was going on until it was too late. We spent 2 hours on that hot bus because of it, but I couldn't even be mad. My middle school bus was wild. I know the police have a job to do and they have a duty to investigate, but I bet the investigation fizzled out once they figured out that the bully got what he deserved in this fight. If you repeatedly keep messing with someone after they've asked you to stop several times, you deserve to get popped in the nose. Seems like the kid being bullied got some good advice on how to punch hard when you mean it. In the comments, has anyone witnessed some instant karma and a bully that got what they deserved? Story 6. This is my most memorable moment, period. I had drank lots of coffee the night before trying to stay awake and study for a test. As I got on the bus the next morning, the crap started to hit me, but this was nothing that I'd experienced before. 10 minutes into my 50-minute bus drive, I'm starting to sweat and then panic. I tried making eye contact with my bus driver through that front mirror. Maybe he'll see my distress, and maybe he'll pull over and I can release my stink at Burger King. And I ended up squatting over my paper lunch bag and taking a massive dump in it, all while sobbing and staring at the back of a girl who sat in the seat in front of me. Afterward, I was so flustered, I just buckled the bag next to me for the rest of the ride. It was a low point in my life. But a few months later, I did it again. Story 7. This isn't completely related, but it all started on the bus and this post made me remember it. It was about 5 years ago, and I think my sophomore year of high school when we were on a field trip to a college. I got in trouble on the bus and was sent to the front of the bus, so one of my friends tweeted, "Free my friend." This is where it got interesting. Since people were asking, my buddies told people that I got arrested for taking some acid from a lab and then throwing it around the room and at students. Keep in mind that I went to a school with over 2,000 students and rumors spread like wildfire. The funny thing is everyone bought it, and then it just so happened that we passed a cop car with some guy in an orange jumpsuit in the back. The kids decided to take a picture of it and then post it all with the same caption as the first post. And after that, everyone, even my friends, not on the trip, thought that I was in jail because I wouldn't answer my phone on the bus. And since my mom worked at the school, word got around to her and she was freaking out. I got back to the school and just hopped in my car because it was the end of the day, so people were clueless as to what happened. The crazy thing was, people who I barely knew still asked me about getting arrested months later. Looking back, it was better than any senior prank that occurred while I was there. Story 8. In 1995, my family moved away from where I grew up in another city as my dad changed jobs. Now, I had just graduated from elementary school, so I was starting high school in a new city. No friends, and this high school was 4 or 5 times the size of the one that I was going to go to. We lived in the outskirts, so I rode the yellow bus. The very first day I get on the bus, and there were 4 other guys and 1 girl that were on the bus when I got on. One of them immediately strikes up a conversation. I can tell this guy's a high energy and loud guy, quite contrary to me. "Hey, what's your name?" I reply, "My name is Natuno." "Natuno? That name's too long. We need to give you a nickname." Now in my head, I was fearing the worst. This guy was going to label me with an insulting nickname on my first day of high school where I knew nobody. The next 5 years could be very long. Now luckily, his intent was genuine, and he came up with the nickname Jim. He then points to a guy sitting quietly across the aisle and says, "That there is D. He's my brother. and I think you guys are in the same grade. You guys should be friends." So D looks up with a big smile with crooked teeth and a weird pair of thick glasses. "Hey, what's up?" He was tall for a teenager, pushing 6'2", and we strike up a little conversation and discover that we have many things in common. We're both into RPGs, MTG, and things of that such. We were also both the youngest child of 3 boys. We related a lot. It was instant. We were buddies. A few months later, my family moves a little further out of town, which now puts me on a different bus route. But I still attended the same school. When we moved to this place for the first 2 months, my bus ride was 2 hours long, one way. So I would get picked up at 6 a.m. and would only get home at 5:30 p.m. But that's an entirely different story. Fast forward to the summer of 1996, and I find out that D is moving away to a city a few hours away. So that means my best friend is no longer going to be at the same school as me. D and I completely lost touch. The internet was in its infancy, and not everyone had emails, so we did snail mail a few times, but that petered out after a few letters. Several months later, I think it was April 1997, I get wind of a new kid that will be coming to our school in our grade, and he will be on our bus route. I knew what this kid was going to be going through, moving to a new town, not knowing anyone, and I made it a point that I would be as nice to this kid and help him make friends at school. So the following Monday, the bus takes a different turn here and there, and we're driving down the street to go pick up this new kid. I look down the road and see this tall, lanky guy, and as we pull up closer, it hits me. I know this guy. Yep, indeed it was. My best buddy D is back in town. We were both very excited that A, he was back in town, and B, the place he moved to was on the same bus route as me. Today, D and I are still best buds. He was my best man, and I was his best man. We see each other weekly. All of this because his brother gave me a nickname and told us that we should be friends. Good on that brother for being so welcoming and friendly on the bus, because that is exactly how all kids need to be these days. Maybe a lost art out there. It goes a long way just to make someone feel welcome and accepted, especially when they're in a new school and trying to make friends. The 90s were such a fun time to be a kid too, because you had computer games getting popular, things like the Nintendo 64, some great movies coming out, and cell phones weren't a thing yet. Man, what a time. Story 9. A few boys dawdled peckers on the bus's chair and then tried to frame me because I sat next to them. Also shy and was a girl, and they were jerks. Driver's assistant physically hauled them out of the bus and made them walk home. It wasn't far, but our bags were stupid heavy for primary school, and this was around noon with blue skies. Apparently, the parents complained and said that if the boys drew peckers, the bus driver and his assistant, forgot what he was actually called, had permission to cane them. But they drew the line at forcing their boys to walk home. So whenever they tried to vandalize the bus, the assistant would smack their fingers with the cane. I got candy for my troubles. Now that I think about it, a lot of this would not fly now. Story 10. On the way back from a field trip to the fire station, some kid stole some trauma shears. I was his assigned buddy for the day, and we had to sit together. He showed them to me, and I told him he'd better throw them away before he got back to school. And he spun them around his finger and flung them out the window, doing 45 miles an hour. They stuck 2 inches deep into the right thigh of a morbidly obese middle-aged woman. He looked at me with a face that said, "How am I going to explain this to my cellmate?" The bus starts slowing down and we're stopped at a red light, and this woman is moving like a linebacker towards us, screaming, "Stop that bus! Them kids done stabbed me!" She catches the bus and is beating on the door, screaming, "Call the police!" Bus driver opens the door and she gets on with blood pooling by her foot, screaming and pointing at kids who might have stabbed her. The cops show up, and my assigned friend is ghost pale and sweating bullets. They didn't even need to ask questions, just took him away in handcuffs. As he is being hauled off, he points at me and says, "He told me to throw him away." I yelled back, "I meant in a trash can, you idiot." Heard that he got 6 months in juvie, and I never saw him again. Story 11. Definitely the day I was assigned to a seat at the back of the bus when I was in 4th grade. I figured the bus driver had some sort of mistake, since the younger kids sat up front while the older kids got to lounge in the back. However, I didn't complain and soon found myself sitting next to a girl named Amber. Amber was the epitome of cool to 9-year-old me. She had ears pierced in 2 different places, wore shirts that had band names on them, and was always allowed to wear dark lipstick. She was older than me, probably almost twice my age, so she used a lot of words I didn't know in her conversations with the other high schoolers who sat by us. I realize now they tried to keep themselves tame around me, but they slipped up from time to time. And on one ride home, a really loud guy named Drew suddenly said, "Oh yeah? Well, your sister gave me a BJ last night." While Drew and some other guy proceeded to scuffle with each other, Amber had the most mortified look on her face. I remember this so clearly, and I turned to look at her, my eyebrows furrowed in confusion, and I asked what a BJ was. She hastily explained that it was when you got someone to blow dry your hair, and for some reason, that made sense to me a little bit. I would be pretty mad too if somebody blow dried my hair, since it frizzes out badly and becomes cotton candy. So I could see why the other boy would want to fight Drew now. He had ruined his sister's hair. Needless to say, my mom had many laughs that day when I got home and told her this story. She explained what a BJ really was, which led to an impromptu adult talk where she discovered that I knew more about the birds and the bees than she thought I did. So that is pretty gutsy for the mom to do the birds and the bees talk in like 4th grade. Seems like a little early, doesn't it? Now, I suppose the hand might be forced, though, if your kid is coming home asking about BJs and the like. I just wonder if the 9-year-old girl knew what it was actually and was just trying to hide it from the kid, or was she just as clueless as he was? It's funny to see what kids come up with to explain certain things, only to find out later when they're adults the real truth. Story 12. Once in elementary school, I fell asleep in the back of the bus and didn't awaken until the bus was pulling into the bus barn. I had to get on another bus, which happened to be going past my school. We had one bus driver who loved Tic Tacs, and he'd be driving along and then say that he was having a Tic Tac attack, and then stop at a mini mart, run in, buy Tic Tacs, give some to the kids, and continue along his route. I broke up with my first boyfriend while on the school bus, and when he got off the bus at our stop, he yelled that he was dumping me just to try to embarrass me, but I just laughed, which kind of deflated him a bit. I had a friend in 6th or 7th grade who had a pet tarantula and had brought it to school for some science thing, like show and tell kind of thing, and while on the bus, took it out of its container and we let it crawl all over us, until the bus driver saw and started screaming. She stopped the bus pretty fast and told my friend to put it up and never bring it on the bus again. Story 13. For some reason, half the people in my grade that were on my bus were absolute clowns and did the most ridiculous things every day. We were the only one of 8 buses going to school packed so full of comedians and pranksters. We had stand-up comedy, to the great dismay of our driver Randy, earphone fishing, impromptu karaoke, and even the great bread incident, but nothing compared to the extraordinary net. Before I can recall that event, however, there's someone that you all need to meet. His name is Laurent. Now, Laurent was special. Laurent was one of the worst students the school had to offer. Now, bear in mind, the school was very private and very elitist, something I maybe should have mentioned before to set the stage. But Laurent's creativity when it came to practical gags was matched only by how piss-poor academic his performance was. All of what I'm about to list happened in a single year, exactly 1 decade ago. Laurent discovered in our history and religion, by religion I mean history and the study of religions, not Christian studies or anything like that, although the school was founded by nuns, that the classroom had a back closet, which was empty yet locked all the times, but it could be unlocked by lifting the door with the knob in a certain way and wiggling it out. Naturally, he did the sensible thing and hid in the closet, waiting about half the period only to fall out pretending to be dead. Our teacher did not like this. Also, Laurent was a sharpshooter. Our physics lab was at the end of the hall, the only classroom perpendicular to all the others. Laurent found the phone number for our physics professor and called him and the SPCA on Skype, forcing the two of them to have a conversation for 5 minutes. That was plenty of time for mischief, though, so he grabbed a fistful of chalks and threw each bit forcefully and with pinpoint accuracy towards the doors of our English, French, history, and mathematics classroom. The 4 teachers went to investigate and somehow got into an argument. Also, Laurent brought to school some omega-3 pills, the ones with the actual oil in them surrounded by some sort of plastic membrane. Being an evil genius, he carefully placed the capsules between students' lockers' doors and the locker's edge. At the time, most people had these large turning padlocks with a thick shackle, forcing them to push the door with their shoulder to have the lock fall downwards and make it easier to turn the dial. With his trap in place, he watched and laughed maniacally as dozens of poor souls crushed the pills and spewed smelly fish oil all over their lockers. I realize now that I may have created too much hype for what comes next, but the event is still burned into my memory, so I'll attempt to narrate it to the best of my abilities. One fateful afternoon, very near the end of June 2007, Laurent decided it was time for his magnum opus. He needed help, though, so he recruited one individual on one of the 8 buses that left the school every day at the same time. The crafty guy then pulled out his 7 bags of thick spooled thread and proceeded to attach a magnet to each end. Now, as previously mentioned, his abilities to throw things had been honed by years of constant practice with old projectiles in an odd and various settings, but using his ability, he threw each magnet towards the other vehicles, tethering them to ours. The newly recruited agents in each bus then opened the window nearest to the magnet resting place and pulled it in, then closed the window, securing the thread. You can imagine the rest. A few minutes later, after the bus left school, several kilometers of colorful strings were scattered around the city, nearly in every direction. The spools were rolling out furiously, and about half of them depleted completely instead of breaking, which in and of itself was amazing. People on the street were cheering, cars were honking, impressed by the beautiful summer garland that was expanding within downtown. Laurent ended up graduating too, which was even more incredible. It seems like Laurent has set himself up for great things in the future. Sure, he wasn't the model student, but some of the most successful and wealthy people were not, often forgoing college in lieu of their own projects and ideas. Laurent is a Renaissance man, and I think he's going places. Maybe even the next Elon Musk, who knows? He clearly has that special star quality of someone who is meant to shine and shoot for the stars. I hope they find what they're looking for.